My name is Charles, and at 73 I realize that life has a funny way of teaching us its lessons. I've always been an independent man, proud even, one of those who thought I could solve everything on my own. But time has a unique way of making us see things differently. The music that silences, I remember, as if it were yesterday when I realized something was different. It was my granddaughter Sarah's 5th birthday, a simple party in the backyard. The children were running around, adults were chatting, and I was lost in a confusion of sounds that made no sense. Grandpa, sing happy birthday with me," Sarah called me with those bright eyes, but the voices mixed with the fan noise, other children's laughter, and the sound of plates being organized. That's when my daughter Amy noticed my confused expression and approached. "Dad, you've been having trouble hearing for a while, haven't you?" At that moment I had to swallow my pride and admit, yes, it was getting increasingly difficult to follow conversations, especially in noisy environments. After much insistence from the family, I finally saw a doctor. Today I wear a discreet hearing aid, one of those you can barely notice. It was strange at first, I confess, but being able to hear Sarah's laughter clearly again, well, that's priceless. The ground that sways. The fall started subtly. First it was that stumble on the living room rug. It happens to anyone, I thought. Then, the loss of balance getting out of the shower. Until one day I fell in the garden while watering the plants. That's when my neighbor Mrs. Thompson, an energetic 80-year-old lady, gave me advice that changed my perspective. "Charles, have you heard about yoga for seniors?" I admit I laughed at first. Me, a former salesman who spent life running from client to client, doing yoga? But she insisted, and I eventually gave in. Now I attend a special class for seniors twice a week at the community center. Would you believe those simple positions and breathing exercises really help? My balance improved, and the back pain, which I hadn't even mentioned to the doctor thinking it was normal for my age, decreased considerably. Driving through life. And then there's the matter of driving. My car, an '89 Chevy Nova that I keep immaculate, is more than transportation. It's my freedom. But I've noticed my reflexes aren't what they used to be. The other day, I almost didn't see a motorcyclist who appeared out of nowhere. It was a scare that made me rethink many things. I haven't given up driving, but I've made adjustments. Now I only drive during daylight hours, avoid rush hour, and installed a backup camera, a Christmas gift from my children. Amy insisted I switch to a more modern car with more safety technology, but I still resist a bit. My old Nova and I have too much history together. Sleepless nights. Well, that's been a chapter of its own in my story. I remember when I could lay my head on the pillow and sleep through the night. Today I wake up 2-3 times to go to the bathroom. I lie in bed thinking about life, remembering moments from the past. I've learned some techniques over time. I created a routine. After the evening news, I turn off the TV, make chamomile tea, read a few pages of my current book. Now I'm rereading The Little Prince. It makes much more sense in old age, believe me, and go to bed. I also removed the cell phone from the bedroom. My grandchildren explained that blue light disrupts sleep. Memory playing hide and seek. The forgetfulness is perhaps what bothers me most. The other day I spent almost half an hour looking for my glasses that were on my own head. I put the remote control in the refrigerator and the milk in the living room cabinet. My daughter laughed, but I saw the concern in her eyes. I decided to face this head on. I started doing crossword puzzles every morning with my coffee. I downloaded some memory game apps on the tablet. Who would have thought that I at 73 would be using this technology? And most importantly, I created an organization system. I have a planner where I write everything down: appointments, medications, commitments. I put a large board in the kitchen with important reminders. But you know something? I've learned to laugh at my forgetfulness too. The other day I told my grandchildren about putting the remote control in the refrigerator, and they found the story hilarious. Little Sarah now always asks, "Grandpa, where did you put the remote today?" Funny how life teaches us to be humble. Each challenge that aging brings is also an opportunity to learn something new, to reinvent ourselves. And perhaps that's the biggest lesson I've learned so far. It's not about fighting against time, but about dancing with it, even if we stumble a little along the way. Today, I understand that accepting help isn't a sign of weakness, but of wisdom. Each hearing aid, each yoga class, each reminder on the fridge is a way of saying yes to life, of continuing to actively participate in it, even if in a different way than I was used to. And you know what? It's all okay like this. The silence of friends. It's funny how the phone got quieter over the years. I remember when my social calendar was so busy, I barely had time to breathe. Every weekend was a different barbecue, a birthday, a meet-up with work friends. Now at 73, I realize my social circle has shrunk considerably. The other day, flipping through an old photo album, I came across a picture of the amateur soccer team I was part of. We were 12 inseparable friends. Today, 3 have passed away. 4 moved to other cities to be close to their children, and the other, well, life gradually distanced us. It was my daughter Amy who shook me out of this melancholy. "Dad, why don't you go to the community center here in the neighborhood? They even have dance classes." At first I resisted. I thought these places were just for old folks, as if I wasn't one, right? But I eventually gave in, more to make her stop insisting. And what a surprise. On the very first day, I met Mr. Johnson, a 78-year-old gentleman who also loved classic cars. We started talking about my Nova and ended up planning to attend a classic car meet together next month. I also met Mrs. Davis, a widowed lady who gives voluntary crafting classes. I ended up signing up for her classes. Who would have thought I'd have a knack for making macrame bracelets? The patience that goes away. One thing nobody warned me about getting older is how we become more impatient with certain things. The other day, I was at the supermarket, and the cashier was taking a long time to scan the items because she was new to the job. In the past, I would have waited patiently, even made a joke to put her at ease. But that day, I caught myself tapping my foot, sighing loudly, looking at my watch every minute. It was my grandson, Peter, 15 years old, who taught me a lesson without meaning to. He was trying to teach me how to use WhatsApp web on the computer, and I wasn't understanding anything. He repeated the explanation several times with infinite patience. "Grandpa, it's normal to take time to learn new things. The important thing is not to give up." That hit me hard. How many times was I being that grumpy old man I had criticized so much in my youth? Since then, I've been practicing deep breathing. I learned it in yoga. Whenever I feel irritation growing, I also started leaving earlier for my appointments, so I don't get anxious about time. The embrace of solitude. There are days when the house feels too big. Since Martha, my wife, passed away 5 years ago, the silence sometimes weighs heavily. The children have their own lives. The grandchildren are growing up. And there are moments when loneliness squeezes the heart in a way that hurts. That's when I discovered gardening. I started slowly, with some tomato seeds my neighbor gave me. Today, my backyard is a small oasis. I have tomatoes, lettuce, mint, and even orchids. These are the most challenging, but also the most rewarding. Every morning, I wake up eager to see how my girls are doing, as I affectionately call my plants. I also started writing. Nothing too pretentious, just a diary where I record my thoughts, memories, and the small joys of everyday life. It's surprising how putting words on paper helps organize feelings. The art of starting over. One of the hardest things was learning to fill the time that was once dedicated to work. For 40 years, I was a salesman in a furniture store. I knew each customer by name, knew their stories, their tastes. Retirement was like a punch to the stomach. Suddenly, that routine that defined me no longer existed. That's when I discovered painting. It all started on one of the afternoons at the community center. There was a canvas painting workshop, and I decided to try it. My first painting was terrible. It was supposed to be a vase with flowers, but it looked more like a colorful smudge. But you know what? It gave me a different kind of joy. It was like being a child again, learning something completely new. Today I have a small improvised studio in the laundry area. My paintings won't end up in any museum, but each one tells a story. I painted the Nova. I painted the garden. I even painted a portrait of Martha looking out the window. That one's in the living room. It's my favorite. Loneliness still shows up from time to time, but I've learned that it doesn't have to be an enemy. Sometimes it's just an opportunity to discover new talents, new passions, new friends, and most importantly, to discover new facets of myself. In the end, I realized that redefining connections isn't just about maintaining old ones or creating new ones. It's also about reconnecting with yourself, finding pleasure in things I never imagined I would do. As my granddaughter Sarah would say, "Grandpa, you're getting cooler every day." And you know what? I think she's right. The transforming strength. The other day, trying to open a simple jar of artichoke hearts, I found myself remembering when I used to carry heavy furniture alone in the store. "Let me open that, Grandpa," said Peter, my grandson, taking the jar from my hands. I confess that it stung my pride a bit. It's not easy to accept that those arms that once assembled entire wardrobes now struggle with jar lids. But you know what my real discovery was? Strength doesn't have to diminish, it just transforms. I started attending a walking group at the park 3 times a week. At first, I could barely complete 1 lap. Today, I do 5 laps and still have breath left to chat with Mr. Johnson, my walking companion who also loves classic cars. The nutritionist at the health clinic, Dr. Carter, taught me about the importance of protein at our age. "Mr. Thompson, you need to strengthen those muscles. Now I have oatmeal with milk every morning, eat more chicken, fish, and eggs. I even learned how to make a banana smoothie with whey protein, a new word I learned from my grandson who works out. Organizing the nest, Martha was always responsible for organizing the house. After she passed, I found myself lost among messy drawers and chaotic closets. That's when Amy, my daughter, suggested we do a cleanup of the house. At first I resisted. Each object held a memory, a story. "Dad, we don't need to throw everything away. Let's just organize, keep what's important, and donate what could be useful to other people." We spent an entire weekend on this task. I found things I didn't even remember existed. Amy's first shoe, letters I exchanged with Martha during our courtship, my first work contract. We made 3 piles: keep, donate, and throw away. To my surprise, the sorting process was almost therapeutic. Today I maintain a simple system. Everything has its place, and every month I do a small cleanup of the drawers. The most special objects are organized in labeled boxes, storing not just things but stories that I tell my grandchildren. The dancing mind. One of the biggest discoveries I made was about how to keep the mind active. It started when Mrs. Davis from the community center invited me to join a book club. I confess that the last book I had read was years ago, but I accepted the challenge. We started with short stories, then moved on to American novels. Today our group meets every Thursday afternoon. We discuss the books, share interpretations, and often get lost in conversations about our own lives. It's impressive how a story can awaken so many different memories and reflections in each person. I also discovered the pleasure of crossword puzzles and Sudoku. Every morning after tending to my garden, I sit on the porch with my coffee and dedicate an hour to these challenges. My granddaughter Sarah says I'm a crossword coach. I'm not quite sure what that means, but from her smile, it must be something good. The inner clock. I've learned to respect my own rhythm. Before, I used to push myself for not having the same energy as I once did. Now I understand that each phase of life has its own pace. I've created a routine that works for me. I wake up early, tend to my plants, do my mental exercises, have lunch at the right time, and take a nap after lunch. The last one is a luxury I allow myself without guilt. I've discovered that I can be productive in my own way. When I'm painting my pictures or taking care of the garden, I lose track of time. It's as if each moment has its own value, regardless of the final result. The dance of balance. The most important thing was learning to balance activity and rest. There are days when I wake up ready to do 1,000 things. I go for a walk, then to painting class, take care of the garden, and still visit friends at the community center. On other days, my body asks for a slower pace, and that's okay too. I've learned to listen to my body. When my back hurts a little more, I do the exercises I learned in physical therapy. When my mind is too agitated, I sit in the garden and watch the birds that visit my flowers. I've discovered that taking care of oneself is not just about exercising or eating well. It's about finding your own melody in the music of life. Amy always says I'm healthier now than when I was working. Maybe she's right. Maybe true health lies in this balance between taking care of the body and mind, between movement and rest, between solitude and company. As Mrs. Davis would say, life is like a garden. It needs daily care, but also patience to see the flowers bloom in their own time. And so I keep learning day by day that taking care of oneself is an art that improves with time, an art that requires attention, affection, and most importantly, acceptance. Conversations with eternity. I never imagined that at 73 I would be having such frank conversations with mortality. It happened on an ordinary afternoon while I was watering my orchids. I saw a blue butterfly landing on one of the flowers and suddenly realized how ephemeral everything is. The flowers, the butterflies, us. It was after Mr. Johnson's heart attack, my friend from the walking group. He recovered, thank God, but it served as a wake-up call. In one of our conversations at the hospital, he told me something I'll never forget. Charles, we spend our whole lives running away from death until we realize that accepting our finitude is what makes us live better. I then began to organize my documents, make a will, write letters to my children and grandchildren. Amy was worried at first. Dad, why this now? I explained that it wasn't about sadness or giving up. It was about love and responsibility. I wanted to leave everything organized, not out of fear, but out of care for those who remain. The mirror of time. The other day, I was at the mall with Sarah, my 12-year-old granddaughter, when we passed by a store window. My reflection caught me by surprise. Who was that white-haired gentleman? For a moment, my mind still expected to see the 40-year-old salesman, tall with dark hair. "Grandpa, look how cool this shirt is. It suits you," said Sarah, pulling me into the store. That's when I realized she didn't see an old man. She just saw her grandfather, the storyteller, the partner in secret ice cream outings behind her mother's back. I learned that age is much more about how we feel than what the mirror shows. Yes, I have wrinkles. Each one tells a story. Yes, my hair is white, but I still have hair, as I joke with Mr. Johnson, who's bald. The weight of what-ifs. The nights are sometimes populated by regrets. What if I had spent more time with the kids when they were little? What if I had traveled more with Martha while she was here? What if I had said, "I love you," more often? It was in a book club session that I found a bit of peace. We were reading a book about forgiveness, and Mrs. Davis shared something that changed my perspective. The past is gone. The future hasn't arrived yet. We only have now to do things differently. I then started turning regrets into actions. I can't go back and spend more time with my young children, but I can be the most present grandfather possible. I can't travel with Martha anymore, but I can honor her memory by being the person she always believed I could be. Learning to say goodbye. The hardest part has been seeing friends pass away. Every time the phone rings with sad news, it's as if a piece of my history has gone too. John, my best friend from the store days, passed away last year. He held so many of our stories, so many shared laughs, but I've learned that longing can also be sweet. Now, when I eat a street fair pastry, I always remember John. It was our Saturday ritual. When I see an old Volkswagen Beetle on the street, I smile remembering Mr. Johnson's stories about his first car. These are small, silent tributes that I maintain, the value of experience. In my day, I caught myself using this phrase and quickly corrected myself. This is my day too, just from a different perspective. Yes, the world has changed a lot. My grandchildren teach me about technologies we never dreamed would exist. But I realize I have something valuable to offer. Experience. When Peter, my oldest grandson, came to ask for career advice, I realized that my life story had value. Not because it's better or worse than today's stories, but because it offers a different perspective, another angle to see things. The courage to be one of the most liberating discoveries was realizing that I no longer need to prove anything to anyone. I don't need to be the top salesman anymore, the perfect father, the grandfather who never gets tired. I can simply be myself, with my limitations and also with my wisdom. The other day I declined an invitation to a night event because I knew I would be tired. Years ago, I would have gone anyway, not to disappoint anyone. Today I understand that taking care of myself is also a way of taking care of others. The gift of the present. The biggest lesson I've learned about dealing with the emotional challenges of aging is that each day is a gift, literally and metaphorically. When I wake up and see the sun coming through the window, when I hear the birds singing in my garden, when I receive a tight hug from Sarah, I know I'm exactly where I should be. Yes, there are difficult days. There are moments of loneliness, of longing, of doubt, but there's also a peace that only comes with time, an acceptance that allows us to live each moment with more intensity and less fear. As I told my daughter Amy the other day, Life doesn't get easier with age, but we get wiser in dealing with it. And perhaps that's the true beauty of aging. It's not about having all the answers, but about learning to live comfortably with the questions. Reinventing love. I never thought that at 73 I would be thinking about love again. After Martha passed away, I thought that part of my life was over. After all, we had been married for 45 years, a lifetime together. How could I even consider opening my heart again? It happened on one of the bingo afternoons at the community center that I met Helen. She's 68, a retired teacher, and has a smile that lights up the whole room. At first it was just casual conversations about books. She's also part of a book club. Then we started having coffee together after activities. "Charles, have you noticed how funny life is?" she told me one day. "We think we've lived everything there is to live, and suddenly it surprises us." I confess I felt guilty at first. It was as if I was betraying Martha's memory. It was Amy, my daughter, who helped me see things differently. Mom always said that love only multiplies, it never divides. The weight of expectations. It's not easy to start over after 70. We carry so many stories, so many scars. Helen is also a widow, and she perfectly understands when I have days where the longing for Martha is stronger. We don't compete with the past. We've learned to honor it while building something new. "You know, Charles," she told me one afternoon as we were walking in the park, "we don't need to rush. Each age has its own rhythm of love." And she's right. It's not like when we were young, full of dreams and grand plans. Now it's a more serene, more mature love. We worry about different things: compatibility of schedules for taking medication, understanding each other's limitations, respecting the space and memories that each of us carries. Learning to trust again. The fear of losing someone again is real. At an age where the fragility of life becomes more evident, opening your heart requires a different kind of courage. Helen and I talk openly about this. Each day is a gift, she always says, and she's right. We've learned to value the simple moments: an afternoon coffee, a walk in the park, a movie session at 3 in the afternoon, because at night we're already tired. Children and new love. Telling the children about Helen was a chapter of its own. Peter, my oldest son, was reserved at first. "Dad, are you sure? Isn't it too soon?" It was Sarah, my 12-year-old granddaughter, who broke the ice. At the first family lunch with Helen, she simply asked, "Grandma Helen, do you know how to make chocolate cake too?" The grandma came out so naturally that everyone at the table smiled. Helen has her own children and grandchildren, and together we're learning to create an expanded family. It's not always easy, but it's beautiful to see how love can create new connections, new possibilities. The wisdom of time. One of the best things about having a relationship at this age is the wisdom we've accumulated. We don't waste time on emotional games or unrealistic expectations. We're direct about what we want and need. "Charles, I need my Wednesday afternoon free to be with my grandchildren," Helen told me right at the beginning. And that's fine. I have my sacred afternoons with my family too. We've learned to respect each other's spaces, the routines already established. The value of companionship. I discovered that love in our golden years has much more to do with companionship than with overwhelming passion. It's about having someone to share the silence of late afternoon with, someone who understands your old references, who laughs at the same outdated jokes. Helen and I have developed our own rituals. Every Sunday we do crossword puzzles together from the newspaper. She's better at the difficult words, I'm better at general trivia. When one of us is sick, the other brings soup and keeps company. We don't need grand gestures. Presence is enough. Building new memories. It's never too late to create new memories, Helen told me when we decided to take our first trip together, a weekend in a nearby historic town. It was different from all the trips I've ever taken. We stopped more often to rest, took more photos. She's better than me with the cell phone, and didn't mind spending hours sitting in a cafe just watching people go by. Love that transcends what I've learned about building meaningful relationships at this stage of life is that love transforms but doesn't diminish. It becomes wiser, more patient, more understanding. It's not lesser than the love of youth. It's just different. As I told Helen the other day, the heart doesn't age, it just learns to love in different ways. And she, with that smile that won me over, replied, "And it's a good thing it learns, isn't it?" And so we go on building our story, day by day, with the tranquility of those who know that each moment is precious and that it's never too late to start over. The garden of discoveries. I never imagined that a small piece of land could teach me so much about life. My garden has become my private teacher of patience and simplicity. Each morning, as I water the plants with Helen, who has now also fallen in love with gardening, we discover small miracles. A new flower that has bloomed, a hummingbird that has nested in the bromeliads, a butterfly that has chosen our roses to land on. "Look, Charles," Helen called me the other day, pointing to a small sprout emerging from the soil. It was one of the sunflower seeds we planted together. It's amazing how nature is in no hurry, isn't it? And she's right. Nature follows its own rhythm without anxiety, without rushing. Flowers don't bloom faster because we want them to. Fruits don't ripen before their time. I've learned to respect this timing, to find beauty in waiting. And the art of living slowly. I remember when I used to live in a rush, always late, always with 1,000 commitments. Today I've learned the value of doing one thing at a time. My morning starts early but without hurry. I wake up with the sun, make my coffee slowly, read the newspaper on the porch while listening to the birds. Amy, my daughter, sometimes jokes, "Dad, have you turned into a Zen master?" It's not quite that. It's just that I finally understood that life isn't a race, it's a dance, and each moment deserves to be savored. I discovered the pleasure of cooking without rush. Every Sunday I make a special lunch for the family. Nothing too elaborate. Well-seasoned beans, fluffy rice, a roast with potatoes. The secret lies in the time dedicated, in the care of each preparation. Sarah, my granddaughter, says my beans are the best in the world, probably because I always tell stories while I cook. Small joys, great treasures. "Grandpa, tell that story about when you were little," Sarah asks every time she comes to visit. And there I go, narrating for the 1,000th time what it was like to play in the street, play ball, fly kites. The sparkle in her eyes makes me realize that the best stories are the simplest ones. Helen brought a new tradition to our afternoons. Tea at 5. Nothing too formal, just hot tea, some homemade cookies and good conversation. Sometimes we spend hours talking about everything and nothing, reminiscing about stories, sharing dreams. Daily gratitude. I started a simple ritual. Every night before going to bed, I write down 3 things I'm grateful for that day. They can be small things. A stranger's smile at the market, the smell of wet earth after rain, a surprise call from an old friend. "Do you really write every day?" Peter, my oldest grandson, asked when he discovered my gratitude journal. I showed him some pages. Day 15, grateful for Sarah's hug, coffee with Helen, the orchid that bloomed. Day 16, grateful for Amy's surprise visit, the bread I learned to make, the colorful sunset. These are simple moments, but they're the ones that weave the fabric of true happiness. The value of silence. I've learned to appreciate silence, not that empty silence of loneliness, but the silence full of meaning. Sometimes Helen and I spend entire afternoons in the garden, each with our book, just sharing each other's presence. "Did you know there are different types of silence?" she told me once. And it's true. There's the welcoming silence of mornings, the contemplative silence of dusk, the complicit silence between two people who understand each other without needing words. The simplicity that liberates doing that cleanup of the house with Amy was just the beginning. I continued the simplification process in other areas of life. I cancelled subscriptions to magazines I didn't read, donated clothes I didn't wear, organized old documents. But the real simplification happened in the mind and heart. I stopped demanding so much of myself, stopped trying to impress others, stopped keeping up appearances. As Mr. Johnson says, at our age we've earned the right to be who we are. The legacy of love. The other day Helen asked me what I would like to leave as a legacy. I thought long and hard before answering. It's not the material possessions that matter. Although I've organized everything to make life easier for my children when I'm gone. The real legacy is in the values, the stories, the love shared. When I see Sarah learning to care for plants with me, Peter inheriting my taste for classic cars, Amy developing my bean recipe, I realize that the most valuable legacy is invisible to the eyes. Life as art. "Life is the art of encounter," Helen said, quoting Vinicius de Moraes. And what wonderful encounters we have when we open our eyes to simplicity. The encounter with the rising sun every morning, with fresh coffee, with the neighbor's smile, with the small daily achievements. I've learned that true richness is in the things that money can't buy: family love, true friendship, peace of mind, gratitude for the simple fact of being alive and able to appreciate another day. As I always tell my grandchildren, happiness isn't in big and expensive things. It's in the small and precious moments we live with those we love. The time of transformations. Dad, I think it's time to consider a smaller house. Amy's words echoed in my mind for days. The house where I raised my children, where I lived with Martha, where every corner holds a memory, suddenly seemed too big. The stairs that never bothered me started to seem steeper, the garden more laborious to maintain. It was Helen who helped me see the situation with different eyes. Charles, change doesn't mean losing the past. It means creating space for the future. We then started looking for ground-floor apartments in a quiet neighborhood. We found one small but cozy, with a balcony where I can maintain a vertical garden. An idea that Sarah, my granddaughter, researched on the internet, especially for me. The dance of adaptation. Grandpa, let me teach you how to use WhatsApp web. Peter, my oldest grandson, has infinite patience when explaining modern technologies to me. At first, I resisted these changes. Why complicate what was already working? But gradually, I began to see the advantages. Now I make video calls with my children and grandchildren, participate in the family group chat, receive instant photos of special moments I miss. Helen jokes that I've become a senior influencer after I learned to post photos of my plants on Instagram. Simplifying with wisdom. Moving to the new apartment was an exercise in detachment and wisdom. Each object had to pass 3 questions. Is it useful? Does it have real sentimental value? Will it fit in the new space? It was an emotional process, I confess. Each drawer opened was a box of memories. But I discovered that true memories aren't in things, they're in the heart. I photographed many objects before donating them, a suggestion from Helen that proved perfect. Now, I have a digital album with these memories taking up only virtual space. New rhythms, new challenges. You need to move more, Mr. Thompson, the physical therapist told me after a minor fall. That's when I started doing water aerobics 3 times a week. At first, I felt out of place, the only man in a class full of ladies. Today, I'm the class entertainer, always ready with a joke to make everyone laugh. Helen also joined the classes, and we've turned this into another moment of ours. After water aerobics, we have coffee at a nearby bakery. It's our new routine, our way of saying that being in motion is being alive, reinventing traditions. The Sunday lunches, which used to happen in the big house, are now a rotation among the children's houses, each week in a different place. At first, I felt like I was losing something precious, but soon realized that the tradition isn't in the place, it's in the people. Grandpa, you can make your famous beans here too, Sarah said the first time I made lunch in the new apartment, and she was right. The love and care in preparing the food don't depend on the size of the kitchen. Technology as an ally. Dad, I installed an emergency app on your phone, Amy showed me one day. I confess that at first I felt a bit offended. I'm not that old yet. But then I understood that it's a form of love, of care. I learned to use several useful apps. One to remind me of my medications, another to order food when I don't feel like cooking, even one for meditation. Helen's discovery that helps us relax before bed. The value of flexibility. If there's one thing I've learned on this journey, it's that rigidity doesn't do us any good. The more flexible we are in body and mind, the easier it is to navigate the changes that life presents us with. As Mr. Johnson says, it's like a tree in the wind. Those that don't bend, break. And he's right. Each adaptation, each new learning, each change of habit is a way of continuing to grow, even when the body demands more care. The legacy continues. Grandpa, tell us what the old house was like, Sarah sometimes asks, and so the stories continue. Memories transform into narratives that span generations. The legacy isn't in the walls of a house. It's in the stories we tell, in the love we share, in the values we transmit. The wisdom of time. Today, sitting on the balcony of my new apartment, tending to the plants in my vertical garden, I realize that life is indeed a series of adaptations. Each phase brings its challenges and its joys. The secret isn't in resisting changes, but in dancing with them. Helen often says that we're like wine. We improve with time as long as we know how to adapt to the new without losing our essence. And perhaps that's the great lesson that aging teaches us, the art of changing while remaining ourselves. The future is today. What do you want to do tomorrow, Grandpa? Sarah frequently asks. My answer now is always the same. I want to live in the present, my dear. We build the future today, with each small gesture of love. And so I continue adapting to the changes that life presents, discovering that each new day is an opportunity to learn, to love, to live. As Helen says, with that smile that brightens my days, life never stops surprising us, Charles, and how good it is that it's like that. Because in the end, it's not about how much time we have, but about how we enjoy each moment we're given. And each adaptation, each change, each new learning is a way of saying yes to life, of continuing to dance this wonderful dance that is existence. And so I end my story, not with a full stop, but with ellipsis. Because life goes on, always surprising us, always teaching us, always inviting us to grow and to love.